Hello everyone, and welcome to Professor O's David Lynch 1001. In today's installment, we will be covering the early short films and first feature film of David Lynch. Now, if you've not seen the short films we're covering today, don't fret. There's a link in the description to this internet archive of a compilation made by David Lynch, featuring some preamble and explanation for all of the short films. There are 2 short films we'll be covering later on in the course, so check those out too. You'll find that in the description along with a bibliography as well as a bunch of helpful links. Though, I recommend all of my students watch Eraserhead before continuing on. We'll be spoiling and dissecting that film, so seek out a copy however you may. I don't judge. And we'll get started on this lesson in earnest. Here's the man, the myth, the legend, David Lynch, at a 2008 art exhibition. He's photographed in Brühl, Germany, showing off his visual art. This is not yet the filmic art, but we'll touch upon that in a second, because this was something that occurred right after his 10th and final feature film, Inland Empire, though it all centers around one key moment. That is the story of the moving painting. I have a quote. "It was one of my paintings. I don't remember which one, but it was an almost all black painting, and it had a figure in it, and the figure was in the center of the canvas. I remember where I was. I was in this fantastic room in the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art building. It felt really good to be inside this building, and it just had great spaces. Had the smell and had good people in there too. This one room was huge and people had cordoned off little places to work. So there were other people in the room. And there's like music playing and you were left alone. You could come in day or night and work. So I'm looking at this figure in the painting and I hear a little wind and see a little movement. And I had a wish that the painting would really be able to move, some little bit. And that was it." So Lynch has a little smoke. A cigarette, of course. He wasn't high off of anything, no matter how many people ask what was he on. He's just an imaginative mind. The only real vices he has, coffee and cigarettes. You can see him enjoying the latter in this photo on the right. To the left, we've got Jack Fisk and his wife, Sissy Spacek. These two would meet during the production of Badlands, a film by, as Lynch would call him, Terry Malick. Spacek starred in the film, and then Fisk was a production designer. They soon hit it off, and Sissy Spacek would go on to actually work on Eraserhead with Fisk. She's even credited in the credits. But enough of that, because we need to focus about a project these two boys were working on. It was for an experimental painting and sculpture contest at their school, where they had devised a moving painting just like Lynch had imagined. Here we have 6 men getting sick 6 times. We see some plaster molds of Fisk and Lynch. You can quite clearly see Lynch right here as they dedicate themselves to a painting that is quite disturbing, yet touches on 2 key themes. That is fire, and that is of sickness. These would be things that Lynch would be continually fascinated with, but here they're in a very odd sense of exploration. It would very much catch the attention of the goers of the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art, when in this contest it would actually tie for first place. But I digress, because first, we must cover 2 other 1967 short films. First, we have Ficticious Anacin commercial. I'll let it play out. We'll talk a little bit about it. within that film and the next I will be showing, you can see the star Jack Fisk, close friend of Lynch's, as we talked all about in our last session together. Now this film is, funnily enough, David Lynch's first commercial for, as you may see, Anacin, a popular brand of aspirin at the time. I find it hilarious that when he starts doing commercial work, it is at first a parody. We also see his first foray into horror with Absurd Encounter with Fear. I'll also play that in full. And with that film, we see David Lynch's first exploration of a key theme, that being sexuality. We see a man approaching a woman, played by Peggy Reavy, who is covered in blue, like some sort of monster, unzipping his, trousers to show a set of flowers instead of what we fear might be something worse and more malicious. It sets us on edge, especially with that music by Krzysztof Penderecki, one of Lynch's favorite composers, a Polish man who often works with very cacophonous sounds. That song was called Capriccio for Violin and Orchestra. Lynch is going to use it here in a second in early experiments, but Penderecki's music is all throughout Lynch's work. In that one, it soundtracks a type of Frankenstein-style scenario, where a man is doing his best to extend kindness to a person in a position of powerlessness, and instead we feel a sort of abject fear at this monstrous figure. He's misunderstood and he just collapses. Pretty wild, pretty absurd, as the title may allow. Now, we're going to wrap back around to Six Men Getting Sick and one of the judges who quite liked it, H. Barton Wasserman, who is the artist behind these avant-garde works. With Wasserman, he wanted Lynch to create a moving painting that he would display in his own home. And Lynch was allowed whatever artistic freedom he wanted. It was just going to be another type of projection and painting project that would go atop a sculpture. So Lynch does his best, he makes what he can with Peggy Reavy. He pulls it together, he looks at the tape and realizes, oh, it's unusable. It doesn't look anything like he expects it to be. He had a budget of $1,000. He spent $450 on this Bolex camera. He did all he could to make a great film, and he let them down spectacularly. He had 5 times the budget he did when he was working on 6 Men Getting Sick. And he had another 16 millimeter camera, but it just turned out wrong. So Lynch, with his head in his hands, returns to Wasserman and is like, I don't know what to do. I'm so sorry. The film's not going to turn out. And Wasserman sees this and he's like, okay, well, you can make whatever you want with the remaining money. I just want to see whatever you can create with that. So Lynch does what he can. He goes on to do some experimentations with this camera he's been gifted, and he uses that for the alphabet and the grandmother. We can see peeks into that with this compilation of his early experiments, as the title may imply. This was released in 2008. There's a link for this in the description as well. It's 22 minutes long and also features Penderecki music. It is a little disturbing. I've heard some describe it as a tape that you may watch and kill you within 7 days because of the haunting imagery. But this would be kind of the groundwork he would lay for other pieces of haunting imagery in work yet to follow. Some of that work yet to follow is the next short film, 1968's The Alphabet, starring Peggy Reevy and also necessitating her part in the story quite a bit, given that her niece had a nightmare which inspired this whole scenario. This niece was repeating the alphabet in her sleep while undergoing a nightmare, waking up and babbling the letters at length. And Lynch heard this story and was baffled by the idea, but yet wanted to turn it into his own short film, specifically one that comments on the distrust with the education system. It does offer yet more horror, as Lynch had art that would get darker and darker the more time he spent in Philadelphia. This would also be reflected in the room that Peggy Lynch is shot in. In this frame, their bedroom was painted all black for the sake of this film. David Lynch would have a habit of painting bedrooms in his spare time, but this one was completely dedicated to this film. This stark darkness creates a real sense of atmosphere against Peggy Lynch, who's completely painted in white. Pardon me. Though, that's not the end, because this is a film that gets viewed by David. I swear to God, Cat, I'm gonna show you Eraserhead Stories. This is a film that gets shown to George Stevens Jr. and Antonio Villani, otherwise known as Tony Villani, as they work at the American Film Institute in Los Angeles. They want to see what Lynch can do further. So Lynch teams up with a student at the American Film Institute named Alan Splett. Alan Splett is really immersed in sound. Lynch often notes the fact that he was blind as a bat, but he had a key ear for making the right sorts of sounds. So here they are together doing some work, composing some different things that would go into Eraserhead. This was all because when David was hearing all the different stock sounds, he didn't find anything that worked. He knew he needed to create all sorts of different specific sounds. This would make the two boys go way over budget, but nonetheless, they'd produce a really magnificent piece of art. That is, of course, The Grandmother. This is his first film to have a tagline, "To live is to die." It focuses on a young boy in a toxic family situation. Horrible family dynamics will become a key theme within Lynch's work, though this is the first implementation of that. We can also see in one of the animation sequences a theater backdrop, which is also a point of immense fascination for Lynch. The star of this film is a young boy named Richard White, who just lived around Lynch and he decided would be perfect for the film. This is a harrowing tale that ends in the boy's grandmother, whom he grown all on his own, dying by choking, and then being buried in a cemetery, which the boy goes to, passes on, inevitably, to meet his grandmother in the afterlife. It's a story of spirituality at the end of the day, and it explores things that will really come to fruition in Eraserhead when it gets delved into even more. Nonetheless, we've got a stunning 30-minute length debut where this falls just between a short film and a feature length. It's really instrumental to painting a picture of the man who would make even bigger, even wilder choices in his art to come. The importance of that cannot be understated because that would land Lynch an AFI scholarship. He would be able to attend school at the Greystone Mansion, fully relocating to Los Angeles and working within what was called the Doheny Mansion after this oil baron you see here on the right, Edward Doheny. There's some stories during Eraserhead where Lynch recounts seeing the ghost of Edward as well as a couple other cast, but I'll leave that for anyone who wants to watch Eraserhead Stories. We'll cover that later on. My main point is that this is a place where Lynch and Splet could blossom further. So Lynch tries his hand at making his next feature, next film, might I say. They wanted to make it a feature, as it was based off of this painting he made, and he would have been given a lot of money to produce it as a full film, and even get some help from another student named Caleb Deschanel. He's a cinematographer that went on to do famed films such as National Treasure, The Passion of the Christ, and Being There. Ultimately, Lynch couldn't make the project. He felt that the more he wrote and the more he tried to flesh out this abstract and slow story, he really felt that it was getting too normal and too far from what he wanted to do. So he grew increasingly frustrated, just like he would with all other forms of education over his life. Now, this reminds me of him being frustrated with specific education even before the art he did at the first two art schools he attended. With his first college, which I forgot to mention, featuring a cohort of his laying claim to a lot of light bulbs that he had acquired from a relative, of which the fraternity would then sell for money that they would use to party. This would build up a theme of electricity because David Lynch would go around seeing all these people that would need light bulbs, and a lot of that would definitely stick in his mind. Electricity is something very important to come, Eraserhead included. Something sparks in Lynch's head that he cannot do this anymore, so he storms over the administrator office, stopping by to say, "Al, I quit." To which Splet responds, "I quit too." And then Al and Lynch are going on to the office, and Lynch tells the administrative office about his predicament, and they respond, "Oh, if David Lynch wants to quit, then we're definitely doing something wrong." So they barter with him, "Oh, what do you want to really do?" And Lynch says, "Well, I've got this script. It's 21 pages. So they're like, "Great, a 21-minute film." And Lynch is like, not quite. So they're like, "All right, a 42-minute film." That's not quite the case, but Lynch carries on anyway because he really wants to make something beautiful. That is a sentiment shared by all these lovely people. Starting on the left with one of the film's stars, we've got Charlotte Stewart as Mary X. She would go on to work with Lynch on the TV show Twin Peaks as Mrs. Briggs. We'll cover that later on, as you may know. Herb Caldwell, my apologies, the film's first cinematographer. Down on the left, we've got Doreen Small, both production assistant and script advisor. She came into the picture after staying with a landlord who had been involved in the production of the blaxploitation film Cool Breeze, one I had mentioned in our last time together. That was also a film that had Jack Fisk on board. Now, Jack Fisk had been complaining about needing more people for the film, so Dorian comes along and becomes instrumental to this process. With that, we also have Catherine Coulson, another key piece in what Eraserhead shapes up to be. She really does just about anything along the set, becoming an assistant director, becoming just any amount of help that she can, financially or otherwise. Many of Lynch's friends would have to financially contribute to the film when they would run out of money, which happened often. But I digress. We've got some of the first people that worked here, and a method to which Lynch would raise more money for the film. He would engage in his visual art here with some drawings. On the right, we see a crucifixion with some grotesque bodily imagery. And on the left, we've got a drab landscape with trees on either side. Trees, of course, being a motif that will recur over and over again. This type of stuff comes to define Lynch at this time, as he really does make some disturbing works reflecting his life in Philadelphia to feed into some of that body horror aspect. We've got this drawing on the bottom left showing a man in a lot of dismay, wearing a tie a lot like our future Henry Spencer. Speaking of Henry Spencer, we've got his child in some early concept art, a couple different conceptualizations of what would become the Eraserhead baby, one of the most iconic images to ever face the screen. Look at that little AirPod. Nevertheless, we must focus on all the people that made this come about. Catherine Coulson at this time was married to the main star of the film, Jack Nance. She would also be the one to comb his hair up, because his hair was the type of hair to stick up like that, as it was just kind of special in that own little way. And it was an accident at first. Lynch saw it and was like, that's perfect, as soon as he had gone into the dressing room. Even after they were all laughing about it, thinking it was like a silly little joke, it came to be something really important to the look of Henry and the vibe of the film. This strange little man who wore this haircut for about 5 years when trying to shoot the film. Real dedication on his part, as well as many of the others who were very patient along the way. We've got a family photograph of the X's here on the right. Not only do we have the actress I had mentioned earlier, of course, we have Mary X's actress, her name being, of course, Charlotte Stewart. But on the left, we have Jean Bates. And down here at the bottom, we have Lynch looking at Spike. Now, Spike is a name that Nance came up with for this creature. Excuse me, this is my third time recording. But with this one, we don't know how it was made. Nobody knows. Lynch took the secret to his grave. It's kind of scary in that way. He would be very ominous about it, saying it was found or born nearby. So people have gone on to speculate all types of things, like it being made of organic material or whatnot. In fact, he would blind his cinematographers when setting up the prop to give you a sense of the mystery at hand. Lynch was a man of mystery, wanting many mysteries to stay alive even after the art had been created, even up to including the art and its meaning. But as this little title says at the top, this is a 6-year production all in all. Lynch first worked with Herb Caldwell and then Frederick Elms here on the right. Both of these men would do a great job doing some cinematography, though Herbert Caldwell would have to leave the film so that he may find more of a living wage. First, he had worked in the Army division of filmmaking, and then graduated to do a little work for Eraserhead, though he was not known for any other film works. He instead passed away soon after. But to take up his mantle, we have Frederick Elms, who would go on to be a very prolific cinematographer known for doing Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart, following David Lynch works. There's some other notable works like Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York, and some recent Jim Jarmusch films. Very important figure right there. At this time, in the middle of the production and one of its many lulls, David Lynch is on the phone with his sister, who seems a lot cheerier, a lot more peaceful than he is usually accustomed. So he asks her, "Oh, well, what's different?" And she says, "Well, I've been trying some transcendental meditation." Lynch gets involved within it himself, and he is so immersed within it that he goes on to create a foundation, as you may see him represent here on the right. He was at a point where he had a film he was making, he had an awesome production, a great place to film it, so many beautiful people around him, a kid, a wife, yet he didn't feel the happiness he thought he would. So he really thought to find happiness within. So that journey really comes to a head with transcendental meditation, an action he would take twice a day, every day, for 20 minutes. He would even take that mantle up when he passed. He was in the middle of a transcendental meditation session at that moment, but to avoid that little upsetting note, we've got a quick aside on transcendental meditation, because I know there are many a skeptic. Although I am trying to dedicate myself to transcendental meditation, I know, as many others know, it is kind of seen as a cult, and for justifiable reasons. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, photographed in the middle alongside the Beatles, was a man subject to a lot of allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior. It's actually what caused the Beatles here to stop associating with him. Transcendental meditation often is taught in courses that have a high entry of paywall from hundreds to thousands of dollars. But I would just like to say, if you do want to pursue transcendental meditation, just like Lynch did, you don't have to go through all those courses. You don't have to spend all that money. You can do it for free. I've got a link down in the description. It's a Reddit post. They can help you get started if you are interested. No shame if you're not. No shame if you are. Do what you like, my students. But we must move on. And to that, we have The Amputee. The Amputee is a short film produced in the middle of Eraserhead's making, when David Lynch was approached saying he should test out some types of film stock that the AFI was considering ordering more of. Now, The Amputee is technically two short films, exhibiting two different types of that film stock. You may see both in the short films of David Lynch, the collection available on the Internet Archive, if you haven't already. And within that, we see Lynch playing the nurse, tending to the wounds of a woman writing a odd letter and reading it to herself mentally. It provides a sort of intrigue, as we want to know, why are her legs amputated, what happened to her, and could this here letter provide any insight? So we hang on to the words, trying to find something. It encourages this mystery. It's got a little bit of grotesqueness that calls out to us, really hammering in on the disability theme, which Lynch returns to time and time again. But here we have, of course, Catherine Coulson. Now, this year was also subject to the unfortunate event that was the divorce of Lynch and Reevey. It was, however, amicable, even if it led to a bit of a mark on Jennifer Lynch, their child. These two people would still remain friends, the best they may. It's just that they could no longer be married to each other, as Lynch became different and more different over time, and Reevey would not commit to the transcendental meditation lifestyle, even if it changed Lynch into a less angry man. There is a lot to admire of the relationship they had in terms of their artistic theming. On the right, we do have a painting by Reevey in more recent years. representing some phallic imagery. And phallic imagery does also play a bit of a role in Eraserhead. So we see a little bit of artistic kinship, though after this point, there would no longer be any collaborations in the artistic sense between Reeve and Lynch. She has gone on to not have a lot of bad blood with Lynch. However, they had to do what they had to do. So the dream carries on. Lynch lives down in the stables at the AFI Conservatory, continuing on with his dream of making this film. He does what he can to combine his work life and his home life in the same sense, to which he was honestly quite happy about. He was enthused to have that in the same sense, though he would, of course, have a home to stay at with Fisk and Spacek. There is a lot of dedication to this project that he would immerse himself in and really find a lot of value in being in these spaces, to just sit and daydream, much in the same way he daydreamed the vision of a man's head being used for erasers. He would just think of ideas to use for the film and imagery, and along the way, he would come up with the lady in the radiator. This is a key aspect of the film. You can see him touching up on the left and right. Well, specifically the right. He's doing the makeup on the right. I apologize. I just want to touch on some missing scenes. On the bottom left, we do have a scene that is somewhat recovered. That is a scene with an electrocutor and two women on a bed suffering at his expense. Henry comes upon them after investigating a sound in a hotel hallway, to which the electrocutor notices, yells at him, and Henry the voyeur shuts the door and tries to ignore it happened. There is a scene written but never shot of Coulson playing the nurse, trying to give the baby to Nance and I keep forgetting her name. My apologies, Stewart. But that never came to be. It just stayed in the script. Same with another moment that displayed the poverty at hand, very representative of Philadelphia, coming to really encapsulate what is Lynch's Philadelphia story. There's all these kids that happen upon a overload, a surplus of dimes, and then the adults soon find out about it and are trying to take it all away from themselves, with one of those adults being played by Lynch, or not Lynch, but Nance as an extra. Lynch would be approaching Nance after he found out Nance was pocketing some of the dimes for himself, to which Nance replied, "Oh, it's all about Lynch," and they would have a little bit of a quarrel. Lynch, however, would go back home, do his best to get his hand on actually financially providing for everyone. To this day, the cast of this film and crew of this film are receiving residuals as the film racks up more and more millions of dollars through all these screenings. However, ever since the first screening, to which Lynch thought was way too long, about 20 minutes over long, we lost a great deal of film. And as the film was not properly archived, Lynch did not believe that this film would even see the light of day for a while. We won't ever really see them or understand them. We'll just have to move on to what we have. A fantastic, exemplary work that shows Lynch really doing one of his more horror-centric works. In this, we have what is essentially a simple narrative of a man with an unexpected pregnancy, much mirroring Lynch's life. With Jennifer Lynch, she was in fact born with cleft feet. They had to do a procedure to correct them, but this sort of difference in her body would gestate in the mind of Lynch, then transforming into the idea of the baby that Mary and Henry have by accident. There's a lot to be said of how much of Henry is from Lynch, but it's not necessarily a one-to-one. Lynch relates to Henry and sees bits of himself in him, but it's not necessarily him trying to push himself to that extent. Really, we've got a lot of different folks that would come back and do more and more work for Lynch. On the left, of course, we have Jack Fisk, the man on the planet. His interpretation of the film would be of karma. The film is about karma, and the man in the planet is representing the switches of karma being pulled. To his right, we've got Charlotte Stewart, who would later appear on Twin Peaks as Mrs. Briggs. A very minor character, but a wonderful character nonetheless. On our top right, we've got Jean Lang, who would be in Mulholland Drive. So watch out for her when you see Irene. Then on the bottom, we've got another character, this time Mr. Roundheels, as he is credited. Mr. Roundheels is played by a man named Raymond Walsh, also known as Jack Walsh. Now, he would do his best to embody this sort of man taking away a girl that would be an object of lust for Henry that he could not have because he was now defined by his status of being a father. And this is a man, Jack, who would go on to star in The Straight Story, as well as one other Lynch work I'm struggling to name off the top of my head. Actually, no, he didn't. What I'm thinking of is John Waters. Yes, John Waters. He had appeared in 3 of John Waters' films up to this point, which is ironic considering Eraserhead and Pink Flamingos would be on the Midnight Circuit. I will move on from my little rant and ramble as I talk about Jack Nance a little. Jack Nance was a reoccurring actor for a lot of Lynch's work. He did a fantastic job even from the start, as Henry is his first role, but one of 7 roles that he would do for Lynch, even going on to have his final role be in Lost Highway, a 1997 film, following his 1996 passing. He's a really wonderful man, really fun in interviews. As with many things David Lynch, I encourage you to explore the world and his actors, such as Jack Nance, on your own. He is really a character. He actually has a documentary about him all to himself. I Don't Know Jack. Anywho, we've got Brad Keeler, a child that was a relative of Toby Keeler, the man who first stole Lynch's girlfriend and introduced him to his dad and the art life. But we've got this connection of that as he brings the head of Henry over to this pencil factory, where we got Hal Landon Jr. running the pencil factory, saying it's okay. But also, funnily enough, appearing in a bit of a meme. If you may know, there's this part in the Rockstar game, L.A. Noire, where this man is very clearly lying, and this is his smug little face. It's been used as a reaction image. It's silly. I'll move on. The themes at hand are what are important. Big ones are the theme of family, goodness me oh my, and industry, the Industrial Revolution. With family, even in the scene, we've got the father talking about him being a man who made the pipes and his knees being ruined and a train coming in, and all these representations of world is pretty alienating. But the family is alienating in of itself. It's another recurring motif, with the family being rotten at its core. A sharp contrast to this Norman Rockwell painting of a chicken dinner, we've got man-made chickens that give off this sense of artificiality, but also echo birthing as they emit this sort of blood and create one of the most embarrassing and awkward, hard to watch instances of a meet the parents scenario. I will cover a little bit more of the industry aspect because that is one of David Lynch's most favorite things. He would photograph it at length. He would include it in so many of his works. He would compare the body to a factory. He would love the sounds. They come into the soundscape of Eraserhead even while Nance is just in his apartment. It is an obsession of Lynch's. Even the train sound effect I mentioned earlier, he uses the same train sound effect at length. He loves that sound. He finds very odd sounds to be beautiful. He even found the siren sound from the Six Men Getting Sick video to be beautiful in its own way. This goes to this morbid fascination with these oil tanks, these drums that Fisk would walk through. There's all this industrial landscape, which can be read as this way that capitalism is throwing a lot of its men to feel inhuman, feel out of sorts. But it should be stated, Lynch just absolutely appreciates these locations for what they are. He wanted to set one of his unrealized projects in them. But later on, when they had become crowded with graffiti, he realized he couldn't anymore. They had lost their spark. But what hasn't lost his spark is Lynch's knack for spirituality. In fact, we've got another little sort of meme here. I'll play it right quick.
Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
Mm-hmm. Why elaborate on that?
No, I won't. No one sees it.
That clip is great to me because it does seem like a joke on its face. But most of the time that Lynch would discuss the lady in the radiator character here, where Henry is embracing her, she is associated with transcendental meditation. She actually didn't come into the fold of the plot until halfway through, when Lynch went on that whole arc. He changed the ending around from Henry being swallowed by the baby to him instead being embraced in this white light. In the novel Room to Dream, Christine McKenna describes it as a story about grace because of this divine intervention. Perhaps this reminder that there is life after death, that there is a cycle, and that, this is a horrible incident and he needs some sort of comfort, maybe even the first bit of comfort he has in the entire film. That lady in the radiator represents this escapism in one key scene, which is a little grotesque. She stands on a stage, dancing to Fats Waller music, this little organ ditty, and stepping on umbilical cords, which, fun fact, the crew had called billy cords to take away from the fact that these were real-life umbilical cords they had grabbed from a hospital, because back in the 70s, you could just go to a hospital and ask for some umbilical cords because you were making an indie film. It's the 70s. Anywho, you could also make things like this. And part of, again, the horror is like, how did that thing come to be? What is that thing? It is a constant source of stress. It laughs at Henry. It gets sick even when he turns his back. It represents the inability to properly relax and allow himself to be himself and explore himself with all his sexual repression. Even in a scene later in the film from this, he bathes in a bath of milk with the lady across the hall, warm milk. And it, again, harkens back to this theme about parenthood and fostering this whole dynamic. It's creeping into every aspect of his life, and luckily Lynch gets to exalt all this, which his daughter Jennifer actually admires because it made him a better dad in a sense. She's talked about it like in Instagram comments and other senses, but I shall move on to really discuss what I had mentioned last slide. Fats Waller, a musician who would produce a lot of the jaunty organ music playing even at the end of the film during the credits roll. His music would luckily be in the public domain. He would make a lot of the vibes increase a little bit in happiness, or I guess an experience of positivity to some extent. It's hard to find a lot of positivity in this very depressing, morose story, but the music's pretty great. I will say that. Glad they could use that, but they could also use the musical talents of Laurel Neer here on the right and Peter Ivers here on the left. Peter Ivers was an important songwriter in his own right, but he made the soundtrack for the song In Heaven Everything Is Fine. Lyrics, of course, penned by Lynch himself. Now, Peter Ivers would even open up for Fleetwood Mac. That's how prolific he was. He would fortunately pass away very short into his life, though he would leave upon the world an iconic song covered by bands such as Devo, Pixies, Modest Mouse, so many, and the influence is innumerable. We'll go on to elaborate on how Lynch would really create dream pop and that sort of styling, and this is a step in that direction for sure. Love the scene, love that song, love it all. Now right here, we've got the man that made the Midnight Movie. We've got this distributor known to all of us as Ben Barenholtz. He went from being a Holocaust survivor to distributing films such as Eraserhead in the Midnight Movie circuit. He would actually be an executive producer on key Coen Brothers films such as Barton Fink and Miller's Crossing, some of their very first. He would help to distribute so many films. If you look up his track record, he's extraordinary. What he did for the film world is truly, like, I'm speechless. You'll have to see it for yourself. Too many things to name. Again, research on your own terms is a key part of this project, even for you, my students. This is, after all, just the tip of the iceberg. We all know, but we can see Eraserhead being screened alongside a short film, one that would precede the film. That is Asparagus by Susan Pitt, an animated film. Fantastic in its own right. Highly recommend if you haven't yet seen it yourself. Definitely abides by that kind of odd midnight vibe, exploring sexuality in its own right. Another film exploring sexuality, yet a lot more crude, is Pink Flamingos. And Pink Flamingos is, as it says, an exercise in poor taste. If you do not know about this film, in a sense, I'm happy for you. But nonetheless, it changes the perception of Eraserhead in people's minds. If there's one theory about Eraserhead that I completely disavow, it's that it is meaningless for meaningless's sake. It is just absurdity and hilarity as like a joke on the audience. It's just being weird for no reason. But that's not true. It does have a point, and so does Pink Flamingos, but it's not meant to necessarily be chalked away. It's really something deep to Lynch. As you may be able to see, Franz Kafka played a big role in David Lynch's creation of the film, specifically the Metamorphosis. That would also come to influence his next film, The Elephant Man, as we will soon talk about. But this is because Kafka would be referred to as an artistic brother by Lynch, and if you look into his work enough, you can definitely see that. Another key work, though not listed here, is The Nose by Nikolai Gogol? I apologize, I'm butchering it, but the point is, it's a man who deals with his nose separating from his body and leading a life of its own, and a little bit of absurdist humor and oddity, and just kind of awe at this obscure story. Still worth checking out if you want to really immerse yourself in the world of Lynch even further. Though we must move on to other films that would be distributed alongside the Libra Films production, Eraserhead. We've got Perry Henzel's The Harder They Come, which I will be watching literally tomorrow night. I'm so excited. It looks great. Then we've got Rocky Horror Picture Show. I've seen it so many times. Oh my goodness. Rocky Horror Picture Show wouldn't have the cult following as today without the midnight movie, without all the people that would sneak out to see such a wild, daring picture that would do so many curious things with like sexuality and definitely things that people would not like to be caught seeing in the light of day. And thusly it becomes a hit. This is a market that breeds a space for a lot of work to be shown where it wouldn't have a lot of other opportunity to seek its core audience. And another example of that is some of the animated work. Sally Cruikshank's Quasi at the Quackadero. Seek this out wherever you can as well. Love this film. So much vision, so wild. A lot of the versions I found haven't had the best of quality. Even still, what you can see is just truly spectacular. A lot of this work is just of its own. But while Lynch would be doing his best to promote this film, he was asked to shoot a trailer. I'll just leave it to you all.
Hello. We're all very happy to be here tonight. First of all, I'd like to introduce my boys. This is Chucko, and this is Buster, and this is Pete. I'm David Lynch, and this is Bob, and this is Dan. And we just wanted to get together and thank all of the people that have supported Eraserhead through the years, and particularly thank the New Art Theater for its support. The New Art was one of the first theaters to ever show Eraserhead. Also, the boys wanted me to wish you peace and happiness. And these guys aren't just a bunch of goofballs. They know that there's plenty of suffering in the world, and they spent many years with little iron hooks in their backs up on Sunset Boulevard. And but they tell me that there's this all-pervading happiness underneath everything. And the more time I spend with them, the more I believe it. And so we wish you peace and happiness, and long live Eraserhead. Thanks a million.
God, I love him. In another testament to his absolute character, we've got his boys, which he would keep in his office for a while after he had caught them on the side of the road, abandoned at a gas station, though he would later abandon them because they would give him bad vibes. I still love this to pieces. It would give people an idea of who this man was. He's often not what you expect when you see a film like Eraserhead, and that's part of why I find him so fascinating. He's got so many facets to him, and he can be quite a meat and potatoes guy, and he can be quite a silly guy, but it's just like no one else I know. It's really like no one else I know, and to do something to that effect, I've got my boys, girls, and theys here in the back, my own little set, as a testament to him and what he has done. Myself, I just, what can I say? What a guy. If there's really nothing else I can say, I recommend for all of you to check out works such as Eraserhead Stories, released in 2001. David Lynch would record his own little documentary, sort of a podcast, and he would call Catherine Coulson up on the phone, and there's a lot of excellent photos that give a deep dive into what the Eraserhead production was like. Really cool, I guess, assessment of what a wild time it was. I keep using the word wild, but these were filmmakers that were doing things like no one else, so I don't really know what else to use. If you want to see more of his work, there's a website called LynchNet that's been around for a while. There's all these different sources just to figure out what he's doing. And then another point of that is this 1979 interview, specifically this excerpt featuring audience reactions to Eraserhead. Now, they're quite polarized. I can quite understand that. The audiences weren't always ready for this type of film. it would come to be admired by filmmakers such as Stanley Kubrick, who'd even gone on to call it his favorite film, even citing it as an influence for The Shining, screening it to the people it would go on to make it, saying that's the film he wanted to make. But you can see his influence in so many things, but surely we must first see the influence on these poor souls. Thanks a million for sticking around. I'll see you all next time. Have a great day.
Beats the hell out of me. I gotta think about it for a while.
So did you want to give you a comment? Did you?
Oh, I thought it was the ultimate suspense thriller. I kept waiting for something to happen, and it never did.
Very entertaining. Very lively film. Gosh, it was the best thing I've seen all year.
Bizarre.
Some inane, bizarre person with a disturbed mind wrote that film, and I did not enjoy it. I enjoyed it very much. My kind of movie.
Eraserhead is a unique motion picture experience. I recommend it to everyone.
I liked it. I've seen it 5 times.
It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
It was very good acting, but I've seen it 8 times, and that's about enough. This time I interpreted it as a nightmare, this time. I thought there were other meanings, but now I'm not sure, really. I compare it to early Fellini, but I like Fellini better.
The most intense thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
I thought it was an intelligently made, compelling nightmare about the repressed sexuality of Henry Spencer. That was his name, right? Henry Spencer. And I liked it.